Standing at the head of the table, I felt the blood drain from my face as Derek's words echoed through the private dining room. This is her last project. We're letting her go. 6 years of dedication obliterated in one casual sentence during our presentation to Harrison Enterprises, our biggest client. James Harrison's fork clattered against his plate as silence enveloped the room. I somehow survived until dessert, when James touched my elbow. "Can we talk outside?" he whispered. What happened next would change everything. I joined Apex Marketing Solutions fresh out of grad school with a marketing degree and big dreams. As a senior account executive now, I had climbed the ranks through determination and results. My biggest achievement was securing and nurturing the Harrison Enterprises account, which had grown from a small project into 40% of our agency's total revenue over the past 6 years. James Harrison, the founder and CEO of Harrison Enterprises, was known throughout the industry for his sharp business acumen and loyalty to partners who delivered. We had developed a strong professional relationship built on trust. I understood his vision for his tech company, and he valued my strategic approach to marketing his products. James was demanding but fair, expecting excellence but rewarding it generously. Every quarter, I personally presented our campaign results and upcoming strategies to James and his executive team. The numbers always spoke for themselves. Harrison Enterprises saw consistent growth in market share and brand recognition under our guidance. My team's campaigns had helped transform them from a regional player to a national competitor in the enterprise software space. 3 months ago, everything changed when my mentor and direct supervisor, Janet Miller, announced her retirement after 20 years with Apex. Janet had taught me everything about client management and had always been my biggest advocate. When she recommended me as her replacement to lead the Harrison account, I thought it was a natural progression. Instead, our CEO brought in Derek Williams from a competitor agency. His resume was impressive, with awards and big-name clients, but something about his polished exterior always felt slightly artificial to me. Still, I remained optimistic. Change can bring fresh perspectives, and I was confident my track record with Harrison would speak for itself. "Bree, your connection with Harrison is invaluable," Derek told me during our first meeting. "I want to learn from you while bringing some new energy to the relationship." His words were reassuring, but his actions told a different story. Within weeks, Derek began excluding me from strategy meetings about the Harrison account. When I created presentations, he would make last-minute improvements that often undermined the approach James and I had previously agreed upon. In client meetings, Derek would subtly take credit for successful campaigns my team had executed long before his arrival. Despite these concerning patterns, I remained focused on the upcoming product launch for Harrison Enterprises. Their new enterprise software platform represented years of development and would position them against industry giants. The marketing strategy needed to be flawless, and I had spent weeks preparing the perfect approach based on extensive market research and my deep understanding of their target audience. The day before our quarterly dinner presentation with Harrison, I discovered something alarming while reviewing the final slides. Derek had completely altered the market positioning strategy I had developed, shifting the target demographic and messaging approach. His changes contradicted everything we knew about Harrison's customers and would potentially cost them millions in misdirected marketing spend. When I knocked on his office door with my concerns, spreadsheets in hand to illustrate the potential impact, Derek barely looked up from his phone. "The changes are necessary," he said dismissively. "Trust me, Bree. I know what I'm doing." "But the data clearly shows their primary customer base is in the healthcare and financial sectors," I explained. "Your approach targets retail and manufacturing, which make up less than 15% of their current revenue. Sometimes disruption is necessary for growth," Derek replied with a patronizing smile. "This is why I was brought in. Fresh ideas." I left his office unsettled, but determined to make the presentation work. Perhaps I could subtly redirect the conversation during the Q&A portion to address the discrepancies without openly contradicting my boss. What mattered most was protecting our client from a potentially costly mistake. That night, I rehearsed for hours, preparing for every possible scenario. This presentation had to be perfect. Harrison Enterprises wasn't just our biggest client. They were my biggest professional achievement. I had built this relationship from nothing, and I wasn't about to let Derek's ego jeopardize it. What I never expected was that Derek had a far more devastating plan in mind than just altering my presentation. I arrived at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown, 90 minutes early. The private dining room was elegant with wood-paneled walls, soft lighting, and a large screen perfectly positioned for our presentation. I meticulously arranged handouts at each place setting, double-checked that the projector was functioning correctly, and reviewed my notes one last time. Derek strolled in just 15 minutes before our clients were due to arrive, looking irritated when he saw me already set up. "You didn't need to come so early," he said, setting down his briefcase. "The staff could have handled this." "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect," I replied, forcing a smile. "This launch is crucial for Harrison." Derek barely acknowledged my response, checking his reflection in a small mirror before adjusting his tie. "Remember, I'll take over after you present the first quarter results. I've made some adjustments to the flow since yesterday." My stomach tightened. "What kind of adjustments?" "We finalized everything yesterday." "Just trust me," Derek said with a dismissive wave. "I know what these guys want to hear." Before I could press further, the maitre d' appeared at the door. "Mr. Harrison and his party have arrived." James entered first, his tall frame and confident stride commanding attention as always. Behind him followed his executive team, Taylor, his chief technology officer, Sam, his chief financial officer, and Amy, his newly appointed chief operating officer. I had worked with all of them over the years and greeted each with genuine warmth. "Bree, wonderful to see you," James said, shaking my hand firmly. His gray eyes were sharp but friendly. At 55, he maintained the energy and curiosity that had built his business from a small startup to a company valued at over $300 million, looking forward to hearing about this launch strategy. "This platform could change everything for us. We're excited to share it with you," I said, feeling a flush of pride despite my concerns. "The team has developed something really special." Dinner began with light conversation about industry news and personal updates. I learned that James's daughter had just started college, and Sam had recently completed a marathon. These personal connections had always been part of my approach to client relationships, something that seemed to irritate Derek, who kept trying to steer the conversation toward business. When the appetizers were cleared, it was time to begin. I stood, clicked to the first slide, and began presenting the quarterly results. Our campaigns had delivered a 22% increase in qualified leads and an 18% boost in conversion rates. The Harrison team nodded approvingly as I walked through each successful initiative. My portion flowed smoothly as I transitioned from past results to the introduction of the upcoming product launch. I outlined the market research, highlighting the specific needs we had identified among Harrison's core customer base. The presentation was engaging, backed by solid data, and received positive reactions from everyone except Derek, who kept checking his phone with increasing frequency. As I reached the transition point, a sense of unease crept over me. Earlier that day, I had tried once more to discuss my concerns about Derek's strategic changes. The healthcare sector executives specifically told us they need seamless integration with their existing systems, I had explained. Your approach emphasizes features they don't prioritize while downplaying what they actually need. You're too close to this, Bree, Derek had replied. Sometimes you need an outside perspective to see the bigger opportunities. Healthcare is saturated. We need to expand their horizons. Now, as I prepared to hand over the presentation to Derek, I noticed James watching me intently. He knew me well enough to sense my hesitation. That concludes the first portion, I said professionally. Derek will now take you through our strategic recommendations for the product launch. Derek stood, buttoning his jacket with a confident smile. Thank you, Bree. What happened next left me frozen in shock. Instead of following our agreed sequence, Derek launched into an entirely different presentation. The slides were new, never seen by me before, presenting a strategy that contradicted everything we had prepared together. While Bree's team has done adequate work with your existing markets, Derek said smoothly, I believe it's time for Harrison Enterprises to break new ground. My analysis shows untapped potential in the retail and manufacturing sectors that could triple your market cap within 2 years. I watched in horror as he presented projections based on assumptions that directly contradicted the market research my team had conducted. The strategy wasn't just different, it was potentially disastrous for Harrison's carefully built reputation in their core sectors. James's expression remained neutral, but I noticed his CFO, Sam, frowning slightly and making notes. Taylor, the CTO, looked increasingly confused as Derek described technical implementations that didn't align with Harrison's platform capabilities. I sat silently, professional smile frozen in place, mind racing to understand what was happening. This wasn't just a few adjustments. This was a complete overhaul of months of careful planning, presented without any prior discussion with me or my team. It was as if Derek was deliberately trying to undermine everything we had built. When Derek finally paused for questions, James leaned forward. "These projections seem aggressive," he said carefully, "particularly since they focus on markets where we have limited presence. What data supports these conversion estimates?" Derek smiled confidently. "My previous agency achieved similar results with comparable products. Sometimes fresh eyes see opportunities others miss." His response didn't answer the question, but before James could follow up, Derek smoothly transitioned to the next section. I caught James glancing at me, clearly noticing my discomfort. As Derek continued, the disconnect between his presentation and the reality of Harrison's market position grew more evident. I faced an impossible dilemma. Correct my boss publicly and potentially create an uncomfortable scene, or remain silent while our most important client received potentially harmful advice. In that moment, I realized something that sent a chill through me. Derek wasn't making mistakes. He was deliberately setting up a scenario where either Harrison would become dissatisfied with our agency, or I would be forced to contradict him publicly. Either way, he would have grounds to push me out and take full control of our most valuable account. What I didn't know then was that his plan was even more immediate and brutal than I could have imagined. And that's why I believe this pivot is essential for Harrison Enterprises' growth trajectory. Derek continued, now 20 minutes into his presentation. He had just recommended completely abandoning the healthcare vertical that currently represented 60% of Harrison's revenue. I noticed James exchanging glances with his team. Amy, the COO, subtly shook her head. Sam was frantically calculating something on his tablet. The disconnect between Derek's recommendations and Harrison's actual business needs was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone in the room. "Now, regarding implementation timelines," Derek said, clicking to a new slide that outlined an accelerated launch schedule that would be practically impossible to execute. I felt physically ill. 6 years of relationship building was being systematically destroyed before my eyes. When Derek claimed credit for a successful email nurture campaign my team had developed months before his arrival, I couldn't remain silent any longer. "If I might add some context," I interjected during a brief pause, keeping my tone professional. "That campaign was actually developed based on specific feedback from healthcare administrators during our focus groups last quarter. The personalization elements were key to its success." Derek's smile remained fixed, but his eyes flashed with anger. "Yes, Bree's team executed the tactical elements after I provided the strategic direction. This was a blatant lie. Derek hadn't even been with the company when that campaign was conceived and implemented." James's eyes narrowed slightly. He had personally praised me for that campaign during our previous quarterly review. "I'm confused," James said, setting down his water glass. "The strategy seems to have shifted considerably from what we discussed last month, particularly regarding our core sectors." Derek cleared his throat. "Market conditions evolve quickly. We need to be nimble." "But our customer research doesn't support this direction," James pressed. "The data Bree presented just last month showed our healthcare clients have a 93% retention rate and account for nearly 2/3 of our recurring revenue." The tension in the room was palpable. Derek's confident facade began to crack slightly as he realized James wasn't simply accepting his assertions. "With respect, James," Derek replied, "sometimes clients need guidance to see beyond their comfort zone. My experience with larger enterprises suggests this is the right move." I suddenly remembered something Janet had told me before she retired. Derek and our CEO, Alan Preston, had been college roommates. It explained how Derek had secured such a senior position despite having no prior relationship with our agency or clients. It also explained why my concerns about his behavior had been dismissed so easily. Perhaps we could look at a phased approach, I suggested carefully during the ensuing discussion. Maintain our strong position in healthcare and financial services while testing these new markets with controlled pilot programs. Derek shot me a look that could have frozen water. I think we're getting off track here, he said sharply. But James was focused now. Actually, I'd like to hear more about Bree's suggestion. A phased approach makes sense given our resource constraints. The problem, Derek said, his voice taking on an edge, is that some team members struggle to embrace innovation. They become too attached to outdated approaches. I don't think careful data analysis is outdated, James responded, his tone cooling. Bree's campaigns have consistently delivered for us. The conversation was spiraling away from Derek's carefully planned narrative. As James and his team began asking increasingly pointed questions about the data behind Derek's recommendations, I could see Derek growing more agitated. His responses became defensive, then dismissive. When Sam asked specifically about ROI projections for the retail sector, Derek fumbled through his slides, unable to produce the supporting data. The presentation was unraveling, and Derek was losing control. These projections were based on Bree's initial market assessments, Derek suddenly claimed, pointing directly at me. If there are inconsistencies, they originated in her department's research. My heart pounded in my chest. This was a direct attack on my professional integrity, and entirely false. The data he was presenting wasn't mine at all. I opened my mouth to defend myself, when Derek suddenly straightened, as if making a difficult decision. Actually, this brings up something I wanted to address more privately, but perhaps it's relevant now, Derek said, looking around the table with a practiced expression of regret. This is Bree's last project with Apex. We're letting her go. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. James's fork clattered loudly against his plate. Taylor froze with her water glass halfway to her mouth. Sam and Amy exchanged shocked glances. I wasn't planning to announce this during dinner, Derek continued smoothly. But given the questions about the strategy, it seems important to mention that we'll be taking the account in a new direction, under different leadership. The blood drained from my face. 6 years of dedication, countless late nights, and consistently excellent results, all dismissed in a single casual sentence during a client dinner. Not even the dignity of a private conversation or formal process. Just public humiliation in front of the client I had nurtured for years. I see, James said, after a long, uncomfortable silence. His expression was completely unreadable as he looked between Derek and me. That's unexpected. I sat perfectly still, professionally trained smile frozen on my face while my career and reputation crumbled around me. My mind raced with questions. Was this planned all along? Had Derek deliberately set me up to fail during this presentation? Was I truly being terminated, or was this Derek's impulsive reaction to losing control of the meeting? Regardless of his motivation, the damage was done. In the world of agency relationships, perception is reality. Even if I somehow retained my job, my credibility with Harrison Enterprises, our most important client, was now compromised. Shall we continue with the presentation? Derek asked brightly, as if he hadn't just publicly destroyed my career. I think you'll be excited about the creative concepts we've developed for the campaign. Somehow, through sheer force of will and years of professional training, I remained seated at that table, nodding at appropriate moments, even asking relevant questions when necessary. Inside, I was shattered, but externally, I maintained my composure. As dinner continued, I noticed something curious. James had barely touched his main course and was watching Derek with unusual intensity. Occasionally, he would type something on his phone, then exchange glances with Amy. Their chief legal counsel, Patrick, who rarely attended these dinners, had been called over twice for whispered conversations. When dessert was served, I contemplated making an excuse to leave early. What possible reason did I have to stay? My role had been eliminated in the most humiliating way possible, and remaining only prolonged my suffering. As I discreetly gathered my notes, preparing to make a graceful exit, I felt a light touch on my elbow. James had moved to the chair beside me while Derek was engaged in conversation with Taylor across the table. "Can we talk outside?" he whispered, his expression serious, but not unkind. Confused and emotionally exhausted, I nodded. What more did I have to lose? The moment Derek announced my termination remains frozen in my memory. The sudden silence that enveloped the room, the weight of everyone's stares, the physical sensation of shock, like being doused with ice water. In an instant, my professional identity had been stripped away in the most public and humiliating manner possible. James Harrison's fork had clattered loudly against his fine china plate, the sound magnified in the silence. His expression shifted from confusion to something unreadable as his eyes moved between Derek and me. The other executives from Harrison Enterprises had similar reactions, a mix of surprise, discomfort, and awkwardness. What made it worse was Derek's casual tone, as if announcing my termination was a minor operational detail rather than a bombshell that had just detonated in the middle of a client dinner. After his announcement, he simply continued with his presentation, clicking to the next slide as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As I was saying, these creative concepts will position Harrison in entirely new markets, Derek continued, his voice jarringly normal in the tense atmosphere. I remained frozen in my seat, smile fixed on my face through sheer muscle memory and professionalism, my throat constricted, making it difficult to breathe normally. My hands trembled slightly under the table where no one could see. The remainder of my career flashed before my eyes, imagining how this story would spread throughout our relatively small industry. Who would hire someone who had been so publicly dismissed? The dinner continued in a strange, strained atmosphere. The Harrison team attempted to maintain professional interest in the presentation, but their discomfort was palpable. No one quite knew where to look, or how to act. Conversations became stilted and overly formal. Derek seemed oblivious to the atmosphere he had created, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He continued enthusiastically outlining his vision, occasionally directing questions my way with false collegiality, as if he hadn't just announced the end of my career. "Bree, you worked on the initial mock-ups for the website redesign, didn't you? Perhaps you could share your thinking on that," he asked at one point, his tone suggesting generous inclusion rather than cruel irony. "Yes, my team developed those concepts based on user testing with Harrison's current customers. I responded automatically, my professional training carrying me through the moment even as my internal world collapsed." I noticed the Harrison executives exchanging glances. Sam whispered something to Amy, who nodded slightly. Taylor kept looking at me with unmistakable sympathy in her eyes. Only James remained inscrutable, his expression neutral as he observed everything with unusual intensity. When the waiter arrived with dessert, elegant slices of tiramisu and espresso, I contemplated how to make my exit. Would it be better to leave immediately, preserving what little dignity I had left? Or would that seem unprofessional, abandoning a client dinner before its conclusion? As I contemplated my limited options, I noticed something unusual. James had been making notes on his phone throughout the latter part of the presentation. Twice, he had excused himself briefly, returning with Patrick, Harrison's chief legal counsel, who wasn't typically present at these marketing dinners. They had engaged in hushed conversations at the edge of the room, with Patrick nodding seriously and making notes of his own. Derek seemed not to notice these side conversations, or if he did, he attributed them to normal business discussions. He continued boasting about his plans for the account, occasionally throwing in subtle digs about fresh perspectives and necessary changes. "Once we implement this new direction, I expect we'll see at least a 30% increase in market penetration within the first 2 quarters, Derek claimed confidently. Despite having presented no data to support such an assertion, I noticed Sam, the CFO, subtly rolling his eyes. After 6 years of working closely with Harrison Enterprises, I knew their team valued data-driven decisions above all else. Derek's approach of bold claims without supporting evidence was exactly the opposite of what had built our successful relationship. As dessert concluded and coffee was served, I began gathering my materials, preparing for a quiet exit. Derek was engaged in conversation with Taylor about technical implementation details, clearly out of his depth but compensating with confidence and jargon. I took the opportunity to slip my laptop into my bag and retrieve my coat from the back of my chair. That's when James touched my elbow lightly, leaning in to whisper, "Can we talk outside?" My heart jumped, but I kept my expression neutral. I nodded slightly, unsure what to expect. As we both stood, Derek noticed and immediately looked concerned, though he quickly masked it with a smile. "Heading out, James?" he asked, a touch too casually. "Just stepping out for a quick conversation with Bree," James replied, his tone pleasant but firm. "Business matter. We won't be long." Derek's smile tightened slightly. "Of course. We're just wrapping up here anyway." The walk through the restaurant felt surreal. My emotions were a storm of humiliation, anger, confusion, and anxiety about what James might want to discuss. Had Derek's announcement simply accelerated a decision Harrison had already made to leave our agency? Was James going to express his disappointment in me personally? As we reached the restaurant's entrance, I braced myself for whatever was coming next. After the public execution of my career, I wasn't sure anything could hurt worse than what had already happened. I was wrong. What James said next would change everything. The night air was cool against my flushed face as James and I stepped outside the restaurant. The street was relatively quiet, with just a few passers-by and the occasional car. I hugged my jacket closer, a reflexive gesture of self-protection after feeling so exposed during dinner. James cleared his throat, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain of how to begin. This was unusual for a man known throughout the industry for his direct approach. "Bree," he finally said, "I want to apologize for what happened in there." This caught me completely off guard. "You're apologizing to me?" He nodded, his expression serious. "No professional should have to experience what you just did. Regardless of performance issues, termination should never be handled that way, especially not in front of clients." "I appreciate that," I said carefully, still unsure where this conversation was heading. James glanced back toward the restaurant before continuing. "How long have we worked together now? 6 years?" 6 years and 4 months, I confirmed, "since you took a chance on our small agency when you were just expanding nationally." He smiled slightly at the memory. "You know why I chose Apex back then? Not because of your fancy presentation or competitive pricing. It was because when I asked a technical question about market segmentation, you were the only one who admitted you didn't have the answer on hand, but promised to research it thoroughly and get back to me the next day." "I remember," I said softly. "I stayed up all night analyzing the data." "And you sent me a comprehensive report at 6 in the morning, James nodded. "That's when I knew you were someone who valued substance over appearance, someone I could trust." He paused, seeming to organize his thoughts. "For the past 3 months, since Janet retired and Derek took over, I've noticed changes, missed deadlines, superficial analysis, recommendations that don't align with our business goals." My heart sank. So Harrison had been dissatisfied with our work. Perhaps Derek's decision wasn't as impulsive as it seemed. "I've raised these concerns repeatedly," James continued, "but Derek consistently blamed implementation teams or miscommunications, never took responsibility." This surprised me. Derek had never mentioned any complaints from Harrison. In fact, he'd repeatedly told our internal teams that James was extremely satisfied with our recent work. "The issues started right after Janet left?" I asked, piecing things together. "Precisely," James confirmed. "At first I assumed it was transition difficulties, but it became clear that something more fundamental had changed." He looked at me directly. "Today's presentation confirmed what I've suspected. Derek doesn't understand our business or our customers. More concerningly, he doesn't seem to care about understanding them." I remained silent, professionally trained not to criticize my own agency or colleagues, even in these extraordinary circumstances. James seemed to understand my hesitation. "Let me be direct, Bree. Was that actually your strategy Derek presented today? The pivot away from healthcare and financial services?" After a moment's consideration, I decided honesty was my only remaining asset. No. That strategy contradicts all the market research and customer feedback we've gathered. I tried to address my concerns with Derek yesterday, but he dismissed them. "I thought as much," James nodded. "The Bree I've worked with for 6 years would never recommend abandoning sectors where we have 90% customer satisfaction and stable recurring revenue." He pulled out his phone, checking something briefly before continuing. For the past month, I've been having Patrick review our contract with Apex. There's a clause allowing termination if key account personnel change, without notification or consultation. My stomach dropped. Harrison Enterprises represented 40% of Apex's revenue. Losing them would devastate the agency. I see, I managed, keeping my voice steady despite the implications. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you, James said, his tone shifting. Bree, Harrison Enterprises is launching an in-house marketing division. This revelation hit like another shockwave. Many large companies eventually brought their marketing in-house, but I hadn't heard any indications Harrison was moving in this direction. The truth is, James continued, I've been considering this move for nearly a year. The only reason I haven't pulled the trigger was because of my confidence in you and Janet. With Janet retired and your role apparently eliminated, there's nothing keeping us with Apex. He paused, then delivered the words that would change everything. I'd like to offer you the position of Director of Strategic Marketing at Harrison Enterprises. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? I want to hire you to build and lead our in-house marketing team, James repeated. Salary starting at twice what you're currently making, plus executive benefits and stock options. My mind raced, trying to process this complete reversal of fortune. I don't know what to say. You don't need to answer immediately, James assured me. But I will need a decision within the week. We're moving quickly on this. My contract with Apex, I began, thinking of the non-compete clause that prevented employees from working directly with clients for 12 months after leaving the agency. That's why Patrick is here tonight, James explained. Derek's public announcement of your termination may have actually done you a favor legally. Patrick believes it constitutes constructive dismissal, which would invalidate restrictive covenants in your employment agreement. I tried to gather my thoughts, still reeling from the emotional whiplash of the past hour. This is a lot to process. I understand, James nodded. But there's something else you should know. Patrick has been reviewing communication between Apex and our team. We've discovered Derek has been sharing proprietary Harrison information with contacts at competitor companies. We have the emails. This new information stunned me. Industrial espionage was not only unethical, but potentially illegal, depending on the nature of the shared information. Are you certain? I asked, my professional world tilting even further off axis. Absolutely certain, James confirmed grimly. We have irrefutable evidence. That alone is grounds for immediate termination of our contract with Apex. He checked his watch. We should return inside before Derek gets suspicious. But I want you to consider my offer seriously, Bree. I believe in your abilities, and I want you on our team as we move forward. As we turned back toward the restaurant entrance, James added one final comment. Whatever you decide, I suggest you don't tip your hand to Derek tonight. Let him think he's won. It will make tomorrow much more interesting. For the first time since Derek's devastating announcement, I felt a flicker of hope. The evening had begun with my professional execution and might end with the greatest opportunity of my career. As we re-entered the restaurant, I maintained my composed expression, but internally, my mind was racing with possibilities I couldn't have imagined an hour earlier. Back at the table, Derek was in the midst of describing the timeline for transitioning the Harrison account to fresh talent within Apex. He faltered slightly when James and I returned, his eyes darting between us with poorly concealed concern. Everything all right? Derek asked, his casual tone not quite masking his unease. Just fine, James replied pleasantly. Bree and I were discussing some project details that needed clarification. I said nothing, taking my seat and sipping my now cold coffee. The remainder of the dinner passed in a blur. I maintained my professional demeanor through sheer determination, even managing a cordial goodbye to everyone as the evening concluded. Bree, I'm sorry things turned out this way, Derek said as we gathered our materials, his voice lowered and tone insincere. I'll have HR send your termination paperwork tomorrow. No need for you to come to the office. I understand, I replied neutrally, giving nothing away. I'll need to collect my personal items. Security will arrange a time, he said dismissively, already turning his attention to James, who was preparing to leave. James, let's schedule our next steps for the transition early next week. Actually, I have a meeting with my executive team tomorrow morning, James replied. I'll be in touch after that. If Derek noticed the coolness in James's tone, he didn't show it. He simply nodded confidently and shook hands with each member of the Harrison team as they departed. I drove home in a state of emotional turmoil. The humiliation of Derek's public termination announcement still burned, but it was now tempered by the unexpected opportunity James had presented. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patrick Harrison, Chief Counsel. James asked me to connect. Available to meet tonight? Important to discuss options before tomorrow. After confirming the number with James, I agreed to meet Patrick at a quiet coffee shop still open late near my apartment. When I arrived 30 minutes later, he was already seated in a corner booth with a thick folder and laptop. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, Patrick said as I slid into the seat across from him. He was older than James, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and the careful manner of someone who measured every word. Of course, I replied. Though I'm still trying to process everything that's happened tonight. Patrick nodded sympathetically. Understandable. What Derek Williams did was highly inappropriate, but it may have inadvertently simplified your legal position. He opened his folder and turned several documents toward me. I've reviewed your employment contract with Apex, which James obtained from Janet before her retirement. She was apparently concerned about how you would be treated after her departure. This revelation about Janet touched me deeply. She had been looking out for me even after leaving. The non-compete and non-solicitation clauses are fairly standard, Patrick continued. However, there are established legal precedents that these clauses become unenforceable under certain conditions, including constructive dismissal or termination without cause. He slid another document toward me. This is a legal opinion I've prepared. Based on multiple witnesses hearing Derek Williams announce your termination in a client meeting without prior notice or documented performance issues, you have strong grounds to consider any restrictive covenants void. I skimmed the document, understanding the general legal principles, though not all the specific citations. So legally, I could accept James's offer immediately? In my professional opinion, yes, Patrick confirmed. Though Apex might attempt to challenge it, they would be unlikely to succeed given the circumstances. Additionally, we have evidence of Derek Williams's misconduct regarding confidential information, which further weakens any potential case against you. He showed me several email chains where Derek had clearly shared proprietary Harrison information with contacts at competing companies. The evidence was undeniable and deeply disturbing. James has authorized me to offer legal representation if Apex attempts any action against you, Patrick added. Harrison Enterprises would cover all costs. I sat back, overwhelmed by the support being offered. Why is James doing this? I'm grateful, but this goes beyond professional courtesy. Patrick smiled slightly. I've known James for 20 years. He values loyalty and integrity above almost everything else. You've demonstrated both consistently. Derek Williams has demonstrated neither. We spent the next 2 hours discussing details. The position James was offering would include building a marketing team from the ground up, with authority to recruit talented people from throughout the industry. The compensation package was more than generous, including an equity stake that could be highly valuable if Harrison continued its growth trajectory. By the time we finished, it was past midnight. Patrick had prepared a formal offer letter for me to review, along with supporting documentation addressing potential legal concerns. The decision was now mine to make. I barely slept that night, weighing all aspects of the opportunity. By morning, I had made my decision. I would accept James's offer, but first, there was the matter of formally ending my time at Apex. Despite Derek's instruction not to come to the office, I arrived at 8:30 the next morning. The security guard, Joe, who had greeted me every workday for 6 years, looked confused when I approached the desk. Morning, Bree. Got a call saying you'd be scheduled for personal item pickup later this week. There's been a misunderstanding, I said calmly. I need to attend a meeting with HR first. Joe, who had always liked me, hesitated only briefly before waving me through. Go ahead. Hope everything works out. At my desk, I found a sealed envelope containing termination papers. According to the documents, I was being terminated for performance issues and strategic incompatibility, effective immediately. The coldness of the language after 6 years of exemplary service and consistent positive reviews stung, but I had expected nothing less given Derek's approach. I was organizing my personal items into a small box when a company-wide email arrived announcing an emergency all-hands meeting at 10 o'clock. The subject line read simply, "Important client update. Required attendance." I decided to attend, sitting quietly in the back row as my colleagues filed in, many giving me confused or sympathetic glances. They had clearly heard about my termination, but were uncertain how to react. Our CEO, Alan Preston, opened the meeting, looking unusually tense. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice. Derek Williams has an important update regarding the Harrison Enterprises account." Derek strode to the front, exuding confidence. "Good morning, everyone. I wanted to personally share some exciting developments with the Harrison account following our successful dinner meeting yesterday." I watched silently as Derek outlined his strategy for Harrison going forward, claiming the client was thrilled with the new direction. He described resource allocations and timeline expectations, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. "Bree's departure will enable us to bring fresh perspectives to this key account," Derek said, glancing in my direction with barely concealed satisfaction. "Sometimes change, while difficult, is necessary for growth." Just as he finished this statement, the conference room door opened. Every head turned to see James Harrison enter, followed by Patrick and 2 other executives from Harrison Enterprises. The room fell completely silent. Derek's expression flashed from surprise to confusion to alarm in rapid succession. "James, we weren't expecting you. This is just an internal meeting." "I apologize for the interruption," James said, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "But I thought it important to deliver our decision in person, given our long relationship with Apex." Alan Preston stood quickly. "Of course, James. We always appreciate your directness. Perhaps we should discuss this privately?" "What I have to say concerns your entire team," James replied firmly. "Effective immediately, Harrison Enterprises is terminating our contract with Apex Marketing Solutions." The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Whispers and murmurs erupted as people processed the implications. Harrison was our biggest client. Losing them would likely mean layoffs and possibly jeopardize the agency's survival. Derek's face had drained of color. There must be some misunderstanding. Yesterday's presentation was just the beginning of our new approach. "There's no misunderstanding," James said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Our legal team has documented multiple breaches of contract and ethical violations, including sharing of proprietary Harrison information with our competitors." At this, all eyes turned to Derek, whose expression now showed the beginning of panic. "Additionally," James continued, "the unilateral removal of key account personnel without consultation violates Section 7 of our service agreement." Alan Preston looked stunned, turning to Derek with growing anger. "What is he talking about?" Before Derek could respond, James pulled out his phone. "I have emails showing Mr. Williams shared confidential Harrison product roadmap information with contacts at Comtech and Radial Systems, both direct competitors. Would you like to see them, Mr. Preston?" The CEO's face hardened as he realized the seriousness of the situation. "That won't be necessary at this moment, James. We take such allegations extremely seriously and will investigate immediately." "That would be prudent," James agreed. "As for our future marketing needs, Harrison Enterprises has decided to establish an in-house marketing division." His eyes found me in the back of the room. "We've offered the position of Director of Strategic Marketing to Bree, given her exceptional work with our account over the past 6 years." The room erupted again, all heads swiveling in my direction. Derek looked thunderstruck, his carefully constructed plan crumbling before his eyes. "You can't do that," he sputtered. "She has a non-compete clause." Patrick stepped forward. "Actually, your public termination of her employment without cause invalidates those restrictive covenants. We have multiple witnesses to that event." Alan Preston's expression had transformed from shock to calculation as he assessed the unfolding disaster. "James, surely we can discuss this. Derek's actions, if true, don't reflect Apex's values or practices." I'm afraid our decision is final, James replied. However, I'd be happy to meet with you privately about transition arrangements. As Alan led James and Patrick to his office, the room exploded into confused conversation. Derek stood frozen at the front, his career imploding in real time. When he finally spotted me at the back, his eyes narrowed with hatred. He pushed through the crowd toward me. You planned this, he hissed. You manipulated James against me. I stood my ground, feeling oddly calm in the face of his anger. No, Derek. You did this to yourself. Every action has consequences. This isn't over, he threatened, but his words held no power now. Everyone had witnessed his humiliation and suspected his guilt. Several colleagues approached me with congratulations and questions about opportunities at Harrison. I answered honestly that I would be building a team, but made no specific commitments. This wasn't the time or place for recruitment discussions. As I prepared to leave with my small box of personal items, Alan Preston emerged from his office looking grim. He approached me directly. Bree, I owe you an apology. I had no idea what Derek was doing. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. He was your friend. Alan had the grace to look ashamed. That friendship clouded my judgment. It won't help now. But I never authorized your termination. That was Derek acting unilaterally. I nodded, accepting his words without commenting further. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once burned. For what it's worth, congratulations on the new position, Alan added. James is lucky to have you. Thank you, I replied simply, then walked out of Apex for the last time, my future unfolding in unexpected but promising new directions. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity as I built Harrison Enterprises' in-house marketing division from the ground up. James had given me complete authority over hiring, structure, and strategy, with a generous budget to match our ambitious goals. My first calls had been to key members of my former team at Apex, people whose talents I respected and whose work ethic I trusted. 5 of them joined me immediately, grateful to escape the toxic environment that had developed under Derek's leadership. I also recruited specialists from other agencies, assembling a diverse team of 20 talented professionals within 6 weeks. We secured a dedicated floor in Harrison's headquarters, designed as a collaborative space that fostered creativity while maintaining the data-driven approach that had always defined my work. James stopped by regularly, clearly pleased with the rapid progress. How does it feel being on the client side now? He asked one afternoon, surveying our newly completed office space. Liberating, I admitted. Being able to implement strategies directly, without layers of agency politics and profit margins influencing decisions. And the team? He inquired, watching the busy activity around us. Exceptional, I said proudly. Everyone's energized by the opportunity to build something meaningful from scratch. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some of Harrison's executives had initially questioned bringing marketing in-house, concerned about losing the external perspective agencies provide. I addressed this by establishing an advisory panel of industry experts who consulted quarterly, ensuring we maintained fresh viewpoints. Our first major project was relaunching the enterprise software platform that had been the subject of that fateful dinner presentation. Using actual customer research and targeted messaging, we achieved a 48% higher engagement rate than any previous Harrison product launch, with conversion metrics that exceeded projections by 32%. The success vindicated James's decision and cemented my team's credibility throughout the organization. We quickly became an integral part of Harrison's strategic planning process, invited to contribute to product development discussions from the earliest stages. While I rarely thought about Apex anymore, industry news occasionally reached me. The loss of Harrison Enterprises had indeed triggered significant layoffs. Derek had been quietly dismissed within weeks of our departure, though the official announcement cited only strategic differences rather than his actual misconduct. On a personal level, the change had transformed my life in unexpected ways. The substantial increase in compensation allowed me to purchase my first home, a small but charming house with a garden in a neighborhood I had previously only dreamed of affording. More importantly, the role's seniority and clear boundaries gave me back evenings and weekends that agency life had consumed. Exactly 3 months after joining Harrison, I put the finishing touches on our new marketing headquarters. The space included state-of-the-art video conferencing facilities, a research lab for customer testing, and collaborative areas designed to maximize creativity and communication. James had scheduled an official opening ceremony, inviting the entire executive team and board of directors to tour the facility and hear presentations from my key team members. It was to be our formal introduction as a division, and I had prepared meticulously. The morning of the event, I arrived early to ensure everything was perfect. As I made final adjustments to my presentation, my assistant, Madison, appeared at my door looking concerned. "Bree, there's someone here to see you. Alan Preston from Apex." I hadn't spoken to Alan since leaving Apex. His appearance was unexpected and slightly concerning given the contentious circumstances of my departure. "Did he say what this is about?" I asked. "No, just that it's important, and he won't take much of your time." I checked my watch. There were still 2 hours before the opening ceremony. "Okay, show him in." Alan entered looking noticeably older than when I'd last seen him. The past 3 months had clearly taken a toll. He was thinner, with deeper lines around his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward a chair. "What can I do for you, Alan?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Despite everything, this man had given me my first real opportunity in the industry. "I'll be direct," Alan said. "Apex is struggling. Losing Harrison was just the beginning. 3 other major clients followed your lead, citing concerns about account management changes." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I made serious mistakes," he admitted. "Bringing in Derek based on our personal relationship rather than merit. Ignoring Janet's recommendations about your promotion. Not investigating when concerns were raised about his behavior." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely curious. Alan shifted uncomfortably. "We're exploring a merger with Meridian Partners. It's not ideal, but it may be the only way to save what remains of the agency." I knew Meridian by reputation, a mid-sized agency with decent work but not exceptional. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure how this involves me." "It doesn't, directly," Alan acknowledged. "I'm here because I owe you an apology, and because I wanted you to hear this from me before industry gossip distorts it." His humility surprised me. The Alan Preston I remembered had never been one to admit mistakes easily. "I appreciate that," I said sincerely. "There's one more thing," Alan added. "Part of the merger agreement requires full disclosure of any potential legal liabilities. The emails Derek shared with Harrison's competitors have raised serious concerns about corporate espionage." This was unexpected. "Is Apex facing legal action?" "Not yet," Alan said grimly. "But Meridian's lawyers are suggesting we should proactively reach out to affected parties, including Harrison, to negotiate settlements before someone files charges." I considered this information carefully. That would be between Apex and our legal team. "I can't speak for Harrison on legal matters." Alan nodded. "I understand. I just wanted you to know we're trying to make things right, however belatedly." As he stood to leave, I found myself asking, "What happened to Derek?" "Last I heard, he was interviewing at agencies on the West Coast," Alan replied. "No one local would touch him after word got around about what happened." After Alan left, I sat contemplating our conversation. His visit had unexpectedly provided closure on that chapter of my career. The agency that had once been my professional home was fading, while I was thriving in my new role. My reflection was interrupted by Madison announcing that guests were beginning to arrive for the opening ceremony. I pushed thoughts of Apex aside and focused on the present moment and future possibilities. The event was a tremendous success. James opened with remarks about the strategic importance of bringing marketing in-house, crediting me with making the transition seamless. My team members presented their specialties confidently, impressing the board with their expertise and enthusiasm. When it was my turn to speak, I looked around the room at my team, at James and the Harrison executives who had welcomed us, and at the space we had created together. 3 months ago, I experienced what seemed like the lowest point of my career, I began. Being publicly terminated during a client dinner was humiliating and devastating. The room was completely silent, everyone engaged with my unexpected candor. But that moment, painful as it was, led to this one, I continued. It taught me that sometimes what looks like failure is actually an opportunity in disguise. It taught me that integrity and relationships built on mutual respect endure, while those built on deception inevitably collapse. I outlined our division's accomplishments and future vision, emphasizing the core values that would guide our work: honesty, data-driven decision-making, creative innovation, and unwavering commitment to the company's goals. As I concluded, James rose to his feet, leading a standing ovation that caught me by surprise. The board members followed suit, their approval evident in their enthusiastic response. Later, as the event wound down and guests began to depart, James approached with a small wrapped package. "A token of appreciation," he said, handing it to me, "for making this transition so successful." Inside was a beautiful silver compass, engraved with the words, "Not all who wander are lost. Sometimes they're just finding a better path." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "For everything." "No," James replied with a warm smile. "Thank you. Derek did me the biggest favor of my career when he fired you at that dinner. Sometimes our worst moments lead to our best opportunities." 3 years have passed since that opening ceremony. Our in-house marketing division has expanded to 65 people across 3 offices. Harrison Enterprises has grown by 140%, with our marketing strategies playing a key role in that expansion. I was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer last year, joining the executive leadership team. As for Apex, they completed their merger with Meridian but retained little of their original identity. The agency that had been my professional home for 6 years effectively ceased to exist. I felt a twinge of sadness when I heard the news, but life moves forward. The silver compass sits on my desk as a daily reminder that career paths rarely follow a straight line. Sometimes the most painful detours lead to the most rewarding destinations. Sometimes public humiliation becomes the catalyst for private triumph. And sometimes, when someone tries to break you, they inadvertently set you free. Have you ever experienced a professional setback that eventually led to something better? The moment when what seemed like your worst day actually became the beginning of your best opportunity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about professional challenges and triumphs, and share with anyone who might be facing their own career crisis. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes our greatest victories come after our most painful defeats.